Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Kristy Taylor. I'm the founder of Work Solutions LLC. We support mission-driven individuals and organizations in the social impact sector. And tonight, I am once again live answering your questions with Ask a Social Impact Career Coach. In addition to that, I'm going to be telling you about some of the things that we have coming up. So here's a question that came in to me. Someone asking, Dr. Taylor, I've been dreaming about a different career path lately, but I'm hesitant to take the leap. And have you ever found yourself longing for something more fulfilling professionally? And how did you navigate that uncertainty? Okay, so with change, there's always going to be uncertainty. But remember, our theme and tagline for Work Solutions is we support mission-driven individuals and organizations, right? So mission-driven, purpose-driven, it's all the same verbiage. If you feel like you're being called to do something greater, something bigger, you need to follow that calling, right? But you need to do this in a way. If you're going to make a career shift or career change, you got to make it strategic. I always, when I'm coaching clients, say, hey, your job search, the process of transition should be a strategic. Sometimes it happens. It's out of our control. You may find yourself without a job. That's totally different. Then you take what you can get, or you may have enough money, say, to get to the next job. But if you're going to make this transition, you just want to be strategic about it, because one, contemplating career change, it can be both exciting and daunting. It's natural to feel a sense of uncertainty when you're considering any type of significant transition, but especially if you are unsure about the right path forward. So again, what is it? Maybe you're just not happy with the job that you're with. Is there something that we can do to put some parameters in place? Because maybe you do have to work that job. But if you're thinking about a complete transition, then you want to be strategic about it. First one, if you know what it is that you want to do and you're clear about that, then you're already one step ahead of the game. And when you're exploring career change, however, it's going to be essential that you start by reflecting on, what's really motivating you and identifying what aspects of your current career are no longer fulfilling or aligning with your goals. So that's the first thing. Like I said, if you already have some type of idea of what you want to do, then you're already in a good place. But if you know that you want to do something different, but you are unsure about the direction that you want to go, then you got to move a little bit different. You got to really think about, what are the things that motivate me? What is keeping me distracted? And if you've been daydreaming about different career paths because you're passionate about a particular industry, and I get this a lot with individuals who work in the social impact, because remember, we are mission-driven professionals. We are purpose-driven. But maybe God has called you to do something and you're dreaming about it and you don't know that next step. So because you're seeking greater fulfillment and you're seeking purpose, you need to just make sure you clarify your motivations and your aspirations and begin with the process of, one, if you don't know what you want to do, but you feel like you're called to a greater purpose, explore potential career options that align with your interests, your skills, and values. A lot of work that we do in social impact is values-based. Transitioning to a new career, it involves careful planning and preparation. So unless it's a situation where you just kind of have to jump and do something because maybe you lost your job, plan it out. If the job that you're working at now, you might be learning vital skills that could help you build up your resume. So this may include, researching industries when you're in the planning process, gaining relevant experience. You could talk to somebody like me who will give you assessments, sit down with you and create a plan for the way forward to make that transition successfully. But if you're doing it on your own, then take your time, research the industries that you are interested in, make sure that what you're pursuing aligns with your skills and values. If it's something that you want to do, but maybe you feel like, okay, at this moment, I don't have the skill set yet. Remember, the skill sets can be gained, right? And in your current position, whatever you're doing in this moment, what are the skill sets that you're building to be able to get you to that next level? And the final piece that I'm going to say to you is just remember that a career change is a journey. You might still need to build that skill set. You might have to start at a lower paying position. You might have to start or do something different so that you can build that skill set that's going to be needed to get you to where you want to go, right? And it's okay to take small steps towards your goals, but just remember that each step is a step towards moving you in the direction that you want to go. And by approaching the process with curiosity, an open mind, and a willingness to learn, you're going to be able to navigate a transition successfully. So that's my advice to you on that. All right, so here's another example of a workplace issue with this next question. Dr. Taylor, I recently had a disagreement with a colleague, and it's been weighing on me. What advice do you have in order to help ease the tension with this coworker? And how do you approach conflict resolution? Okay, so it's not normal. It's not uncommon to have workplace conflict. Most of us try to go to work, come home, do our job. Work takes up a big part of our day, and you're not gonna always agree with everybody. Now, one thing that I want you to consider, that is it a conflict or is it just a disagreement, right? So if it's just a disagreement, because you're not gonna always agree with everything on everybody, you could just sit there and you work both of them out the same way. You're gonna find a way to talk to that person and connect with them, and you need to be professional in your communication to let them know, okay, this is what worked and what didn't work. And if it's truly that level of a conflict, then you might have to bring in somebody to help you to navigate those conversations. So my notes, I have workplace conflicts. This is a natural part of life. Conflict, priorities, and personalities, they do clash. But again, is it just a difference of opinion? What is the real level of the conflict? Is it just a disagreement? While conflict can be uncomfortable and it can be challenging to navigate, it can also present opportunities for growth, because sometimes when you have those differences of opinion and perspective, it might open your own mind to say, okay, wait, I didn't even think about this. Because sometimes conflict arises because we might be stubborn or stuck on a certain topic. It has to be this way, right? But when you find yourself in the midst of that and you start to kind of rethink, depending on what it is, you kind of rethink your own thought process, maybe you can get a different perspective on what that person is feeling and thinking, kind of look at it from their perspective. And maybe you can come to a compromise. And sometimes that's just what it is. So when you're faced with a workplace conflict, make sure that you approach the situation with empathy and open mind again, and a willingness to listen. Try to understand that other person's perspective, because again, they might be telling you something that you didn't always consider. And maybe you had a vision for something to look this way. So yes, of course, that has happened to me. I can be stubborn in my own right. I've had to learn to be, with years of supervising people, that has definitely taught me to have an open mind, because one, as a leader, you can't get things done by yourself, right? You got to have people who are out in the fields and on the front line working. And so you need to really be open to that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily conflict. I would say it's more of a disagreement in perspective, but the people who are there and really doing the work, by taking time to listen to them. And I would say that was more so in the early days of my leadership. Oh, it has to be this way. But you evolve as a leader over time, because you realize that what it really takes to get things done with your team is you got to listen. You got to be open to feedback, to trying to understand the person's perspective and motivations. Don't just make assumptions or jump to conclusions. And by practicing active listening, demonstrate that empathy. Again, try to look at it from their perspective. Try to have a sit-down conversation with that individual so that you guys can navigate that process and articulate your thoughts and feelings clearly. I really like this one. If you're listening to someone, it's kind of like you're repeating back to them what they said. That kind of shows active listening. Focus on using the I statements and saying things like, so what I hear you saying, not what I hear you saying, like not with an attitude, but just like really trying to keep an open mind, listen to that person, avoid blaming and criticizing the other person, because that's only going to escalate the tension. But repeat back to them the things that they're saying, and consider maybe they didn't understand the way that you explained it, or also self-reflect so that maybe when you were trying to explain the concept or whatever it is that you guys had a disagreement about, maybe you didn't explain it in a way that they could understand it. Because a lot of times some disagreements occur or conflict occurs because you may be both trying to say the same thing, right? If you're unable to resolve a conflict on your own, don't hesitate to seek mediation. You heard me say that earlier, right? So you have supervisors, your HR representative, a neutral third party. I really think that honestly is much more professional to either go to your supervisor or HR. I wouldn't bring anybody unless it's another team. It just depends on that level of conflict, right? If it's just a difference of opinion, you can say when you guys sit down and talk, say, hey, you're listening to each other. It doesn't look like we're going to come to a mutual understanding on this. And then maybe it's like a team project or something. So maybe you bring another person in, but you're not bringing this person in to really be aware of your conflict per se. You can just explain like, hey, we both have this perspective. This is a difference of opinion on how this project should go, and wanted to know your perspective. What do you think? Because again, that might be a team member who can give you guys a more strategic perspective or help you to bring that together. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is just remember that when there is conflict resolution is a skill the first time you experience something like that, a disagreement, just like don't be so hard on yourself. The biggest thing is like if it happens, you remain professional. You shouldn't be fighting with people at work, right? But you're gonna have disagreements, and that's why I say I kind of use look at conflict at different levels. It's a natural part of you remember the basic group function, forming, norming, storming, performing. That's just forming, storming, norming, performing. That's like basic group dynamic functions. So remember that this is all a part of the process of learning each other, especially if you're somebody that you work with. You guys are new to each other. You're learning each other's personality. Conflicts are going to rise, but it's just the level. Is it really an in-depth conflict or just a disagreement or perspective of opinion? Okay. Remember that you're working with folks 8 to 10 hours out of the day. So you want to make sure that you have good connections with them. All right. Good relationships. Okay. I'm going to do 2 more questions today. Hi, Dr. Taylor. I'm a virtual medical coder. Okay. I know who this is. Working remotely has blurred the lines between work and personal life for me. And have you experienced challenges with time management in working remotely? Well, personally, I love working remotely, but I also like to go to the office, right? I think like I really value being around people. And so when you're working, one of the things that I do from a working remote standpoint is I like to have a separate space in my home for my remote job. And I'll also for this business work solutions that I'm running. So I have a separate office, but not everybody has that ability. So you just have to know that when you're at work, right? And yes, we have the convenience to be able to run and do different things, but I am a project manager by trade. So I like to make sure I plan out my day. I have a notebook, check things off, and that helps me to manage my time. I also try to be realistic with myself. So my advice to you is, if you're a remote employee, managing your time effectively as a remote worker, it's going to present some unique challenges because, again, you can get distracted. You got to be disciplined, self-motivated, and you have to be able to maintain those boundaries between your work and personal life. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed by your workload and struggling to stay productive while working remotely, I'm going to just give you 2 or 3 strategies. So I already talked about the workspace. You got to have a designated workspace. Even if it's your kitchen table, you need a designated workspace where you can focus. And whatever those working hours are between 8 and 5. Some work environments are different too, because if some work environments are more like, okay, you work from home, we're more so focused on you delivering the project. And it just depends on your work culture. So by separating yourself in a designated workspace, you're able to give yourself an area where you can focus. You create that dedicated workspace, and it signals to your brain that it's time to focus when you go and you do get in this routine. I was thinking today about myself, right? I have to have me a Fitbit. I have to wear a Fitbit. I have to have a cup of Starbucks coffee to function during my day. That is literally my routine. If I start my morning without a cup of coffee, if I don't have my Fitbit to be able to track my steps, I lost my Fit. I broke it. I lost part of it. I literally had to order me another one because it's how I function. But when you have that dedicated workspace as a remote employee, it just is all part of something. It creates a routine for you, and it lets you know, like, okay, when I'm sitting here in this office, it's time for me to focus. Another thing is, we talk about routine. So you have a dedicated workspace, but then also actually developing a routine. Like I say, I know that when I get up in the morning, I'm going to grab a cup of coffee. I'm going to put on my Fitbit. I might, whatever I do, because I have to walk to the train to go to my full-time job. But start your day and end your day on time. If it's an 8 to 5 job, just know start your day, end your day on time. Putting some structure in your day can really help, and being consistent about it. So be sure to include throughout your day your regular breaks. Take a moment to recharge and prevent burnout. So break up your day so that you're kind of doing something different. But again, you still need to have some structure and a routine. It's also important, you prioritize your tasks. Now, this is something that happens all the time, whether you work in an office space or you work from home. I have to have a notebook. I got a notebook here. I have to have a notebook where I prioritize my tasks. When it comes to managing my business, I use something called an EOS system. We use Trello. We meet every week. We kind of just started that process. But the whole point of it is that we develop priorities and targets in terms of where we're going to go. Here's what we're going to do for the quarter. I do the same thing with work. When I go to my drill weekends for the military, I have a notebook that I carry around, write down everything, and I prioritize tasks, and I know what's going to be able to what's realistically we're going to be able to accomplish in that weekend. I do the same thing with my daily job. So when you're working remotely, you need to prioritize your tasks based on urgency and importance. It's not always best to do the shortest thing, the quickest thing first, because you can knock it out. Because remember that whatever we're doing, we're burning energy, right? And consider using like productivity techniques such as time blocking. Sometimes, like for me, I have to block off my calendar to say, okay, on this particular time, this is what I'm going to be doing this. I've had to do that before because I've had a job where I've had so much work to do that if I didn't block off my calendar and say, okay, from 2 o'clock to 3:30, this is when I'm working on this task. It worked for me. And so those are just some techniques for you as well. Also, be careful about blurring the lines with your work and personal life. Obviously, you have some flexibility there, but you shouldn't probably be you don't like psych yourself out and like, okay, well, I could just finish this tonight at 8:00 p.m. You should be done working by 5 or 6 o'clock, right? And ideally, in a real world, you want to be done. I would like to be done by 3 or 4. But leading to, you don't want to just like have so much crossover that you start working long work hours or feeling like that because you're working from home, that you have to just get this stuff done. Again, it's about prioritizing and pacing out your week. Set specific start and end times for your work day and disconnect from the work related activities. I know that when I close the door to my office, right? When I close the door to my office, that's it for the day. And finally, practice self-care. Take care of yourself, your well-being, and your well-being when you're working remotely. Take time for a break, stretch, exercise. I love my Fitbit because I can go and take a walk, and I'm counting my steps. And remember that really you being productive and effective when it comes to working from home is just really about prioritizing your task, knowing when you need to take a break, not overwhelming yourself. It's not always about, my uncle told me this like probably when I was a kid. I was like 8 or 9 because I really hated math. And he was like, do the hard ones first, do the hard math problems first. And that's just something I've always carried with me, which is I don't always just jump and do the easiest task first. I go ahead and try to get the hard task because I already have the energy to do it. So once the hard task is completed, then it makes it much easier to do those easier things. Last question. Hi, Coach. Mona here. I'm feeling burnt out. Well, that's the topic that I love to speak on. Mona's burnt out with her current job and considering taking a sabbatical. So if you don't know what a sabbatical is when you can take a bit of leave time from your job. Like when I was working in higher education, I think that we had a thing in place. Like after you had been working there for 7 years, you could take a 1-year sabbatical. Is this a wise decision? And so, Mona, what I'm going to tell you is that it really just depends on the type of job that you have. If it's something that they allow, because for some people, the term sabbatical means that you're going to quit, right? I remember you're going to quit and maybe come back and start working later. And if that's the case, well, do you have your savings in place? You would have to think about all the things that you would need in place to be able to do that successfully. In my instance, like it was a benefit of the job. If that sabbatical, you could get paid up to 1 year of your salary. If it's maybe like you were doing research for your dissertation or something like that, it had to be something meaningful that would have a benefit. So yeah, because the thing about burnout is a serious issue. And if you at the point where you feel like I need to take a sabbatical, if that's unrealistic for you, because again, you have to really be clear about what your goals are and what you hope to achieve during that sabbatical. I met a teacher. I was staying at I was visiting Boston, and I was staying at a hostel, which was so cool. That's a whole nother dope experience. But I met a teacher from Denmark who was on a 1-year sabbatical. So she was traveling the United States for a year. She was very clear about her goals. She wanted to learn more about the United States culture and history. So if you're going to do this, then you need to, be clear about what your goals, and you need to discuss it with your employer. You got to make sure that you're transparent with your employer about your burnout, and you need to explore options, because what if it is unpaid leave? Not everybody's going to have that advantage, the advantage that we had when I was working in higher education. And you got to plan your finances. I've said that to you already. Carefully plan, budget for your sabbatical to ensure that you're going to be financially stable in the time that you are away. Now, everybody doesn't have the advantage of going on a sabbatical. So if you don't have that benefit from your employer, what can you do? I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But the last thing I'm going to tell you, Mona, is that, also as part of your planning process, consider your professional connections. Make sure that throughout the process and over the course of that year, however long the sabbatical is going to be, typically it's about a year, that you stay connected with your colleagues and up to date on the things that you need to for your career field. Because a well-planned sabbatical, it can be really beneficial. But what I will say to you, Mona, is let's talk about in this moment, you are burnt out. So what can you do? I have, as a mindset coach, when I started Work Solutions, I was just doing regular career coaching. And people often wonder, why do I include mindset coaching in my coaching practice? Or I talk about resiliency. Well, because I've been a person that has experienced burnout. And I can tell you right now that if you are in a position, Mona, where you feel like you need to take a break, you got to start today taking care of yourself. Because while you go through this whole process of sabbatical, what are you going to do today to take care of, Mona? Meaning, take that 5 minutes, learn to prioritize, learn to say no, learn to set boundaries. Learn that every fire, sometimes there's going to be 1,000 fires. You can't put all of them out at one time. So you got to learn to prioritize yourself, so you are not in a position where you feel like you got to completely walk away from your job because you're burnt out. And a lot of that is focused on self-care and how you are considerations for, I don't know your life, but considerations for like your everyday life, your work-life balance, and how you're managing your time. And remember that if something happened to you today, they don't advertise your job within a couple of weeks. So you need to take care of yourself. All right. Now I'm going to end there. And thanks for tuning in. So if you listen to this on playback, drop your questions in the chat. Continue to message us on TikTok. Email us. Let us know what you want to know. We'll take time out in our schedule to give you some answers. Check us out on Work Solutions, WORXK Solutions. Check us out on YouTube, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thanks, and have a